Yeah.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Long Haul Fitness. My name's Nick Bagley. I'm your host, and today to kick things off, I got my boy Killian Hamilton here. What's up, dude? How are you?
How are you?
Not bad. So just a little bit of background on Killian. I was introduced to him through the Prescript certifications, or what do you guys even call Prescript? Just certifications?
Yeah, Prescript's continuing education company. So,
I like that. Better than what I said.
Yeah, course depending. There are courses that we offer that are accredited. You get CECs if you have a personal training certificate. And we're in the accreditation process to create a Prescript course that is an accredited training, like coaching course. So
nice. Yep. I remember Jordan saying that that was the plan when I first did level 1. Shit, that's almost been 2 years ago that I did level 1.
Yeah.
And then I've done level 1, level 2. I did your skill acquisition. Then I'm on nutrition now. So I mean, for anyone who is a personal trainer or just looking to increase their knowledge with fitness, it's a great place to be. You guys have done an amazing job creating a better community around fitness. And the big thing there is, like, especially for myself when I first got really started with all this, I just felt like I always needed to know everything. I made a post about that the other day of, like, I felt like I needed to know everything all the time. And it's like, if I have the right people around me, I don't need that. And y'all have 100% created that, where there are the right people around you. And the community group, the certifications, can't speak highly enough of them. But you want to give people a little bit of background of just who you are now?
So I'm Killian Hamilton. I'm the Director of Programming and Innovation. So I have a large hand in all the course offerings that we bring out, including skill acquisition, which I develop and teach myself, along with the Prescript Collective. So a big hand in the Emerging Ideas Lecture Series, which, Nick, you're going to be a part of really soon. We do literature reviews. It's like an open source Discord. So really, like, Prescript Collective is something I'm really proud of, because basically I wanted to find a way that people can enter into the Prescript community without necessarily having to get started on, like, a long-term kind of certification, and then they can get involved in the way that we think, the way that we coach. And also, like, having a vetted forum for information in fitness is really important. Right. Where I feel like people can just Google or YouTube or go on Reddit and read, or remember bodybuilding.com forums, and just get any amount of information from, like, a little avatar character. You have no idea who the person is. So at least when you enter into the Discord, like, all these people are exactly who they are. You can look them up. It's us.
Right.
So at least, you know, when you ask a question into that space, you're asking it to people who actually work in the field that you're interested in. So yeah, it's a large part of what I do. Outside of that, I'm a competitive powerlifter. I've done track and field in the past, bobsled in the past, powerlifting. I roll around on the ground right now and do jiu-jitsu, and then work with a bunch of fighters. Really, more than anything, I would say at the moment, a large majority of who I work with are combat athletes. So a cool switch later in my career.
Cool, man. Yeah, the talking about the community group will be a kind of a good segue into what we're going to discuss today, because I feel like so many times with our job, we get caught up in just that job and that one specific lane, that we forget that there's other viewpoints of training, right? And not that necessarily how you train an MMA guy is going to translate to how I'm going to train a bodybuilder, right? But somewhere in the middle of that, we could potentially find something that could benefit both of us, right? So getting myself outside of my normal sounding boards has been the biggest thing for me that's helped me kind of push my training along so much. And then whenever you start to kind of, like, I'm not necessarily teaching people, but, like, whenever you start to, like, explain things to people, you start to get a better understanding of it, right? So that's where, like, doing the Prescript certifications and then taking it straight to the gym floor and applying what I've learned in those courses has really helped change things, right? Because I feel like a lot of people just, they learn something online, they're like, oh, that's cool, and then they just try to talk about it on the internet. And it's like, do you actually know what you're talking about? Do you have a full understanding of the thing that you're looking to speak on here? But before we get rolling into the question, I've got a would you rather for you to kind of get things kicked off. Would you rather be born without knees or without elbows?
Without knees, for sure. Like, I'd rather be able to...
Without knees?
Yeah, without knees, man. I want to train upper body. I don't care about legs. I heard you're not...
You don't want to squat again?
Yeah.
I guess you can technically do, like, you can still do RDLs, so you can have, like, jacked... You can do stiff legs. You can have, like, jacked glutes and hamstrings. You just have no quads.
Yeah, just have huge, ridiculous glutes, so...
Yeah, I mean, half the world doesn't have legs anyway, so I guess not having knees would probably be the way to go on that one.
I think so.
I have to agree. Yeah. So the topic that we chose to discuss today was kind of dogma in training, and both you and I have seen this like run rampant for a while now. And before we even get into that, like I have to say that I was there. Like I have been in that position where it's like I decided like there's only one way to train. There's only one exercise that's going to do the best thing. There's only one way to do this. There's only one way to do that. But then as I started to talk to more and more people who don't have that viewpoint, I realized how stupid I sounded. And then having, like, even listening to people talk about it that way, where it's like, this is the only exercise you can do. It's like, that's stupid. There's all these other exercises you can do that work well, that have worked well for decades. And you coming along saying that the profile or the X, Y, and Z is not perfect now makes all these other exercises useless is kind of what we were going to talk about here. So, what are some of the biggest trends that you've seen recently with like as far as that topic is concerned?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that I've seen, and I think maybe it's fading out, which is good, but it's having to train the length-tension relationship of each muscle group. And I think this is becoming so dogmatic because I think we're confusing length-tension relationship with muscular development or as a driver of muscular development. So I think when people hear shortened and lengthened, they're perhaps hearing stretched and contracted.
Sure.
Which isn't necessarily true because we're talking logistical positions of the body. We're not necessarily talking muscle fiber length. So because so many people jumped on length-tension relationship and saying there's a shortened and mid-range and lengthened, here's how all these machines manipulate those, a lot of people who maybe don't have the same level of understanding heard, oh, this trains my contracted bicep, my bicep peak, maybe. This trains my like resting bicep size. And it's like, okay, no. So let's understand that. Let's to use a popular term, unpack that in a way. So that's one of the largest, I think, problematic dogmas I've seen from the outside in a hypertrophy set.
And that was a good way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I were to look at what drives hypertrophy, you have volume and you have intensity. So if we were to look at length-tension relationship as it applies specifically to hypertrophy, it's mid-range. Like, it's finding greater and greater ways or easier and easier ways to train a mid-range position because the mid-range is the strongest position, so I can do the most and I can do the heaviest.
Right.
So if you wanted to look at length-tension relationship, you should really be going into a gym and identifying all of the mid-range movements to do and maybe lengthened.
Right. And I think the big thing there is like it's the shortened and lengthened positions is a good way to find some extra, right? So like if I go in and I train back and all I do is pull downs and rows, guess what I trained that entire session? The mid-range of my biceps, right? Yeah. So this here, they worked during that. So like if I want to finish off my arms at the end of my session, why would I now go and do curls? Like why would I go do a basic dumbbell curl? Like I have to do curls to train my biceps. So it's a different type of curl. But like I'm not going to just do hammer curls and easy bar curls and dumbbell curls, like 3 different variations of the same movement just with a different implement. I could potentially go and do the behind the back cable curl or the high cable bicep curl. To get in those different positions to potentially get more, but 100%, yeah, we're our strongest in the mid-range, and that's where the bulk of our training will live, is in that position. And the other place that I've found that the focusing on the length-tension relationship is when it comes to creating a program to where you can still get output at the end of your sessions, right? So, like, for the shoulder, for example, like, our shortened position is going to be the place where we lose output first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the fully shortened position is going to be the first place that goes. So we want to tax that first, and then at the end we want to kind of remove some of that stimulus if we want to continue to push things, especially from a bodybuilding standpoint. Like if I'm looking at training shoulders, I'm not going to put dumbbell laterals at the end of my session. Like maybe I could potentially find a reason. I'll back that up because look, I just got dogmatic on the thing that we're talking about, Dogma, but there could potentially be a place for me to put it at the end of the session, but it might not be the most ideal.
Yeah.
And I'm going to find a way where I can actually reduce a little bit of load at the end of my session so that I'm not taxing that shortened position. I'm actually taxing the lengthened and X, Y, and Z. So versus just being like, oh, I've got to fully contract my bicep. It's like, okay, sure. But let's look at it in a smarter manner. And the big thing that I've seen a lot is talking about going, this exercise is the most perfect exercise to train quads or to train back or to train shoulders. And look, I understand that. I get that that is the idea. And I get that that is the most perfect situation. But not everyone has access to it. Not everyone's going to like it, right? That's a big portion that I think people miss when it comes to the perfect setup, right? If it's perfect, but I fucking hate it, is it perfect? Like, that makes no sense. So, saying that there's only one way to train a lat, or only one way to train a quad, or only one way to do this and that, it really removes all these other things that we can look at. Because if we're looking at fitness has been around forever, right? Bodybuilding has been around a shorter period of time with that. And it's like, you cannot take all of the decades of training that all of these people have done that is not perfect and throw it out. Like, would I ever in my life tell someone to train like Ronnie Coleman? No. Look, I personally know Branch Warren. I watch him train every day. I will never in my life tell a client that's what that needs to look like. Yeah. But you cannot deny that that man won all the shows that he won. So, and I guarantee not once did he go, hey, this is the perfect exercise for us to train this. I guarantee those words never came out of his mouth. He's like, this is fucking hard. Let's go do it.
Yeah. Actually, just give me 1 second. I have a good...
Yeah. Oh, this will be good.
So, like...
The shirt I'm wearing... Do what?
What you're explaining kind of makes sense with this. So you know that I do photography, and you...
I knew that was going to happen at some point.
Dude, that's what it's... I love it.
Whatever.
So you just bought a camera, and I do photography.
Yep.
No way a photographer, but I take photos. So this is a camera. Now, what you're describing is there's no perfect way to do something. There's like a best way, but then all things considered, we have to understand how to manipulate everything. Well, on a camera to take a photo, like you have an ISO, you have a shutter speed, and you have an aperture. So the aperture has like an F number, f1.8, f2.5, f8, f5.6. Then you have a shutter speed, which is like 1 out of something. It's how fast the shutter opens and closes. And then you have an ISO, which is basically how sensitive the camera is going to be to the light. Well, all of these things do the same thing. They all let more or less light into the camera. So the result is the same, more or less light. But each one has its own specific consequence. By changing the aperture of a lens, how much it's open, more or less of the image is in focus. Like when you're shooting a video with your camera, you're going to want you in focus, the background blurred. It's going to be the low aperture. If you want to let things move, fast things move without motion blur, fast shutter speed. If you want to shoot when it's dark, high ISO. If the ISO is high, the image is going to be really grainy. There's lots of noise in it. If you are shooting and it's dark and you leave the aperture really open to let more light in, you're going to have a lot of motion blur and everything's going to be trying to focus. So when you look at that, it's like at the end of the day, when you take a photo, the photo is like subjectively good or subjectively bad. Like things are in focus, the lighting is good. It's a good photo. But the settings of the camera, once the photo is taken, to 90% of people are going to be almost impossible to know exactly what the combination of these three settings were. Well, that's an exercise. Like we shouldn't be looking at why the hack squat is best. We should better describe why, how and why to use a machine, how and why to use a barbell, how to why to use a cable. So when you're faced with any one of these things, you're at least using it the best way it's used. It's like, what rep range should you be barbell squatting? What rep range should you be machine squatting?
Right.
What rep range should you be using cable? And so on. I think that's really a better example of how to use these implementations, or length tension relationship. What is the result? The result is going to inevitably be the same. What is the consequence to the choice? What's the side effect?
Right. Yeah. And like you touched on a great point that I think a lot of people understand, because like I just bought a camera, mine's up there, and you just explained a lot of stuff that I didn't know. But at the end of the day, when you click that button, what happens?
Totally.
You take a picture.
Yeah.
And then the picture comes out, and somebody can go, cool, a picture, right? So at the end of the day, like, are you going to build muscle by doing these exercises? Yes. If you use some that might not be the most ideal, are you going to build muscle? Yes. If you're training the way you need to train and pushing yourself the way you need to push, then you're going to build muscle. Like, and you're probably going to learn something along the way where it's like, maybe that was not my best thing. And ideal, perfect, whatever word you want to use there is all subjective and based on the individual you're looking at within the context of what they want, what they have available, and then where they're trying to go. So all of those things fit together to now create, okay, maybe that exercise that I thought was going to be perfect is not necessarily perfect anymore, right? So it's just a weird thing. Like if I'm a construction worker, right? So we're going to go down this analogy rabbit hole since you pulled out the camera. If I'm a construction worker, I don't want to go, man, I got a hammer, I'm good, right? I got this hammer and I'm going to build this fucking house. Everything in this house is going to be hammered together. I'm just going to hammer everything and then we're good. It's like there's probably a lot of other tools you need. And there's probably some tools in that bag that you don't use often, right? They're probably chilling. They're probably there for like the very end or like some touch-up stuff here and there. But like you don't want to go, oh, I don't need that because I barely ever use it, right? It's still a tool that can be used to make progress or to build the house or whatever. Got off the analogy there, but who gives a shit? You understand what I'm saying? So to limit my scope of exercises available because it is not the most ideal hypertrophy stimulus is just not a good idea to me. And it's like, I want as many tools as possible so I can train as many people as possible and as many scenarios as possible. Like, I want to be able to cover every base that I can for whoever comes to me. And the big thing that I touched on a second ago that I want to circle back around to is like enjoyment. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about training, we talk about it in a bubble or a vacuum or whatever the hell you want to call it. But nothing happens in the real world in a bubble. Nothing, right? So if I'm so focused on, oh, this lateral is the perfect, or this pull down is the perfect thing, or whatever, but that person's like, man, this sucks. I don't enjoy this at all. And they're not going to make progress, and they're going to find someone who will, right? They're going to find someone who gives them a program that they enjoy, right? Because then once they enjoy it, they're going to put the effort into trying to do it, right? And to try and force a square peg into a round hole because it is perfect makes no sense.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a big thing. Like, I think Shallow says it, like, I'll give him credit for whatever it's worth to it, but it's like there's like a fourth dimension, which is time. And like a lot of decisions can be made around time. Like if I hear the statement like all beginner people in the gym should learn how to do barbell movements, it's like I don't disagree because I think it is a tool at some point to use it. And why should they learn how to use barbells? Because they have more time than anybody who's invested any time in the gym. Because there's no way in your first 1 to 3 years you're competing at anything you decide to compete at. You're training. So it's like, yeah, why should a beginner person who wants to train hypertrophy use a barbell? Because they don't have anything better to do. There's no time constraint. Like, yeah, go learn how to use a barbell. Get good at it. The what you do under a barbell will still apply to what you do on a machine. But then guess what? When you're like, oh, I'm 32 weeks out from doing a show, don't use the barbell now. Because now there's a strict constraint on how fast you have to accumulate muscle, how healthy you have to remain, how much intensity you have to be able to push. So it's like, yeah,
Right.
all of these things are determined by time, right? Like length, tension, relationship. If you train 5-6 days a week, go nuts and train shortened, mid-range, lengthened, all these different exercise choices. Go ahead. If you train 3 days a week, find a mid-range machine and put a lot of weight on it. You know, so I think
Right.
we often disregard time as a large component to decision making.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like I think everything the hard part here is like trying to fully nail things down, because it's like if we're not looking at a specific individual with a specific goal, with the program setup and everything, it's hard for us to make full complete thoughts here, right? Because it's like we don't have someone to apply it to and what they're doing. And I think that's where a lot of the stuff on social media kind of gets lost, right? Because when people are looking at your content and they read or hear you say, this is the perfect exercise to do, they now believe that they don't know what you know, right? And it's a sales point. But that's just not possible. So there has to be context to what we're doing. And I fully understand that there are exercises that can be better and can be worse as far as a strength profile or biasing a muscle or X, Y, and Z, but we have to look at the person, we have to look at the scope of the full training program, again, what they have available, those kinds of things. But I feel like a lot of the dogmatic things that we're seeing when it comes to you should only train this way, this is the perfect split, this is the perfect exercise, whatever, comes down to a sales tactic, right? Yeah. Whether they're purposely going, I'm going to do this to try and sell somebody, or whether they're just doing it because it's what gets traction, is kind of what it boils down to, because we live in a world where it's like you've got 15 seconds of someone's attention at most, right? Like if you don't catch them the first couple of seconds, you're screwed. And I think someone in my space that does this really well and I feel like has started to push back on it now is Joe Bennett, right? So if you look at Joe Bennett's stuff, he'll tell you like, hey, this exercise is great because it helps bias this muscle that we're looking to hit. But I can't throw out all this other stuff over here. He made a post not that long ago that I was like, dude, he's nailing it right now. He put up something about pull-ups, right? And pull-ups have been used for years to build a good back. And it is a great back exercise. It's great for shoulder health. There's so many great things to a pull-up that I guarantee bodybuilders could use, right? But because it's not the perfect thing to bias the lat or bias the trap or whatever, it's just kind of a broad back movement, it now kind of gets thrown out with the bathwater, right? It just sucks because the pull-up is a great movement. Is it going to fully hit my lat from top to bottom? Maybe not, right? But that's why you have other exercises in your program. It's not like I'm telling you to go do pull-ups your entire workout, right? If I told you to do that, yeah, you might be missing some holes in your back. There might be some things missing when you go to get on stage. But if I use that pull-up as a tool and set it up in the program appropriately, it could now be a great lat movement. It could be a great back developer. So it's like these things all need to be worked to get together within the scope of a program on an individual to now decide whether or not it's actually a good movement or not, right?
Yeah, and I think like even the question around like exercises that are most efficient or exercises that are best, like you're saying, are people throwing out the pull-up? Like I like the pull-up. The other thing I like doing is pronating my wrist at the top of like a single arm lat pull down. Reason being, like you said, because I'm doing more than one back exercise, and I'm not going to take a half measure in a lengthened lat movement to keep the tension on my lat and not train my teres, major teres, minor, if the rest of my lat workout is 6 more exercises that semi-supinate my wrist. Like,
yeah, it's a great point.
That I use to like create shoulder health and external rotation and
sure
strength, then I'm going to need to do shoulders. Like that's the other thing. It's like, okay, again, at what consequence? So I pronate my wrist. I don't keep all the tension in the lat on overhead lat movements. Overhead lat movements really aren't that great for lat development anyways, which is the argument as to why the pull-up isn't a great movement. But allowing myself to protract and depress my shoulder is going to allow me to get my hand over my head on the day that I have to go train shoulder. In a community of people who can't get their hands over their head, I also see a large community of people who refuse whatsoever to pronate their wrist when their hand goes over their head, and I see a correlation there. So I think, again, the same thing is time, right? How many exercises do you have at your disposal? What truly makes a movement optimal? And at the same time, if you're going to make statements like that, you can't blindly ignore other things. And
right.
To look at one movement outside of a program and go, this is best, is hypocritical because it's not the only movement you're going to do.
Yep. And the thing there that you said something that sparked a thought was like the application of the exercises is what makes it good or bad.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing that's frustrating about about saying that there's only one way to do a certain thing is when I have someone come to me and I give them a pointer on like, try this with your execution. Do this on this movement pattern. Let's see if we can get some more out of it. And then they go, oh, well, I was doing it wrong. No, that's not what I said. You're not doing it wrong. There's optimal and then there's not optimal, right? But who's to say what's optimal and what's not? Because unless I asked you what your intent of that exercise was, that now tells me whether it's optimal or not. If you're telling me, oh, I'm doing this dumbbell row because I want to train my lats and my elbow's out here, okay, probably not optimal, right? You're probably not going to hit much of your lat, if at all, right? But if you're trying to hit your rear delt and you're doing a single arm dumbbell row and you got your elbow out here, fantastic, bang on, dude, you got it all day. Like, would that be the first movement I'd go to? No. Is it what you enjoy? Great. Like, that's what matters. So the application is what ends up making the exercise usable or not. You know, like, that is ultimately the deciding factor of what makes or breaks an exercise. Can this person execute it well? Does it apply to what we're trying to do? And are they making progress, right? Progress... I've said this to multiple people now because they've gotten, like, I've had people make arguments about, like, not even just in the we won't go down the rabbit hole, but, like, not even just in the exercise stuff, but with nutrition, right? So people talk about, oh, that's the worst diet. He shouldn't be doing that. He shouldn't be doing that. I said, okay, wait, pause. Is that person making progress? Yeah? Okay. So shut the fuck up. Is it the diet that I would suggest for somebody? No. Is it the training I would suggest to somebody? No. Are they making progress? Is their body improving? Yes. Cool. Awesome. And there's, like you said with the overhead thing, like there are different reasons to apply exercises than just I need more X, right? I need more shoulder. I need more lat. I need more quad. That we need to look past what we're doing right now, right? Because when I'm 90, no one gives a fuck what my back double bicep looked like. Yeah. Right? But you know what I want to be able to do?
Put my hand over my head, yeah.
Grab something off a fucking shelf. Right? So, I understand that maybe if I don't program things optimally, maybe I'm going to lose a little bit. But how much of that am I going to lose? Yeah. Right? And the argument also comes back to maybe if the person just moved better, they would be able to present it better. Because it again, circling back to bodybuilding, not just broad fitness here, but I actually have a perfect example from myself of the post I made right before I left for vacation of the changes that I made in the off season, right? And like it's 15 pounds of tissue. I went from like 235 to over 250, and the difference is drastic, and especially in the back shot. But the main difference is that I can pose better. Yeah. I can externally rotate my shoulder. I can get this thing back here now, so everything pops the way it should. Everything shows better. I can see my delts from top to bottom. You can see my bicep peak. The lats are pulling out more. The teres is pulling out more. And not just because I added tissue, but because I was able to roll my shoulder back. So it's not always necessarily about finding an exercise that can create more tissue. It's about finding an exercise that can make the body move better while still building tissue, right? And just because you pronated your hand at the top of a movement doesn't now decide that, oh, well, Killian's not going to train his back anymore, right? Yeah. There comes a point where, like, if we get overhead and we let it fully stretch all the way out, we're doing all this stuff, it might have some depreciating effects where maybe we're training more of, like, the shoulder than anything, trying to, like, offload stuff into the rotator cuff and get everything set. But maybe that's what that person needs. Maybe that person needs to be able to move their shoulder overhead so that they can do that back double bicep.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like going for a output over everything is not the way to do this, right? Yeah. And I feel like output over everything has become the end-all be-all with my community, right? Where it's like output is the king. And I don't see it that way. And, like, I understand it because output is what is going to help us build the most tissue. But if I'm outputting all the time, there's eventually going to come a point where my body tells me to go fuck myself. So my runway is going to be about this short. If we start to create more, like, less focus on output and more focus on function and stability and mobility through exercise, we can spread that runway out, right? So maybe instead of my programming only lasting me 8 weeks before I need to deload and pull off because something hurts, maybe I can double that because I spend a little bit more time working the stability, getting myself moving better, getting myself into positions that I don't necessarily have command of. Because I feel like so many people are just, they want to roll around on the foam roller, get something to relax, right? And then go train again. But then all of a sudden they're hurting again after. So the thing again is to go foam roll it or get a massage or whatever. It's like, okay, maybe if we just looked at your programming and made some slight adjustments, we could make that tissue more tolerant of what it is that you're doing. If the tissue's more tolerant of what we're trying to ask of it, it's now going to have less issues with injury, right?
Yeah, it's like I think the best way to look at it, like an analogy, I don't know, maybe people in Texas understand, is like drag racing, right? Like drag racing is output over everything. Like how much ground contact do you have? How much torque can you produce?
Right.
A drag race is real short. And like that's
sure.
actually output over everything. Like, yeah, a drag car is going to win in a quarter mile maybe over, you know, a car that has more top-end speed, but you're not going to have to rebuild the top-end speed car every, you know, mile to 2 miles, right? It's the hitting like the nitrous oxide. It's like, yeah, sick. That's output over everything, man. Now you have to rebuild the whole car. Like, again, I think not managing for the result of something, because like we said, do anything, muscles are going to grow. Don't manage for the result of something. Manage for the consequence, the side effect of the choice, right? Like you said, like being able to get your hand over your head, not being fucking sore every leg day. Like, I do not understand, specifically for lower body, the weird relationship to being like, absolutely murdered my quads today, can't walk. No one ever says that about their pecs, though. Like, this is not like, went in and trained chest and absolutely cannot lift my arms or hold my baby. It's only for legs. Why? Because they're managing not the thing they want to manage. They're just managing the thing to say they worked hard at it. It's like, well, why do all these people who hold themselves on legs still have small legs? Because they have to train legs every 7 to 10 days, you know, or they don't present well on stage because they don't know how to breathe. The first bodybuilding, like competitive bodybuilding client I ever had was a client in their off season because their double bicep pose looked like this. And they're like, dude, I can't get my arm up to pose on stage. I pulled out of my show because I couldn't move my arm. I pulled out of my show because I couldn't move my arm. I was like, that's crazy. Jacked up, man. Like, that seems like a real waste of a prep. So I think, like you're saying, in bodybuilding, output over everything because I think the belief, and as an outsider, I'm not a bodybuilder, but as an outsider, the belief would be bodybuilding is about muscle tissue. But bodybuilding is absolutely not about muscle tissue. It's how muscle tissue presents on stage.
Yep.
Dude, all you guys look exactly the same to me when you're standing still in the gym. When you're just standing there, it's like, I guess. But you know when shit pops off? When, like, the dude pulls his pants around his ankles, and then you're like, oh, shit, that guy's bigger than that guy when he hits a pose. But just standing there, everyone has 80% same muscle development. Like it's a sport, right? And I think that's a big thing in bodybuilding. Like any sport, is although specificity has the greatest importance, specificity in exercise has the minority. It's the minority of what you actually need to do with specificity. Like, what is specific to your sport takes up the least amount of knowledge when it comes to programming. It's extremely important, but around actual hypertrophy and strength, the specificity of your specific sport applies very little to how training works. Like, if it's a science, it has to apply to all things. Like physics, physics on Earth, the way we understand physics works on Earth no matter what country you go to. Physics in space might be different, but physics here is the same everywhere. So that has to apply to all sports. You can't, the gatekeeping comment of, well, you don't do bodybuilding, so you have no say in this. It's like, that doesn't even make any sense because it's literally exercise 99% of the time until you pose or until you pick up a fork. All these sports are the same. So it's like literally you can comment on exercise.
Right. And if you and I were going to have if we were going to have more of a discussion on bodybuilding, you wouldn't be the person I would go to if we were going to talk about nutrition or drugs or posing, right? I would find other people to talk about those things. But if we're looking at training, there is a million ways to look at training, and there's no reason why you can't objectively look at someone who's training to build muscle and go, maybe we can make that better, right? And the output over everything comment, I think, is possibly a culprit as to why these things are being pushed that way, right? Of this is the only thing we can do because we can output so much here. We can output. It's like, okay, maybe if you pulled back on the output and just put a little bit of attention over here into stability, right? Maybe you wouldn't hurt all the time. Right? I'm not saying that it's going to fix everything. I'm not saying that you're going to come out on the other side better, but there is a strong possibility that it'll help, right? And just because you are sacrificing some output because of stability being higher or whatever demand it is that is reducing output doesn't make that exercise any less important or less beneficial to the person. Right? So, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine not that long ago. Bernardo, I love you. I know you're probably going to watch this. But me and him were going back and forth on it. And his outlook on, where we'll bring it back to the leg thing, is his outlook on programming a Bulgarian split squat would be he would use a Smith machine or some kind of fixed implement so that you could drive output. And look, that's fantastic. You can do that all day. But if I have a program set out where I've driven output on a squat pattern already, I've probably done a hack squat or some variation of a squat, possibly done a leg press, probably done a leg extension, or it's all these other things where I've already driven output, how much more output do I have to give on that movement? And now, if the idea is to drive output with a single leg movement, do you want to replace it with the bilateral? Not really. That's not where I'd want to go with it. You could. I mean, I could find a reason to do it, but it's not necessarily what I would want to do. I just want to keep the Bulgarian where it should be, which is training pelvis or hip stability, right? Training internal and external rotation, getting your hips to sit right and move. And get them to not be this fixed thing that can't shift back and forth and up and down and left, all these things. So focusing so hard on output alone, I think, is what is a potential cause to going down that dogmatic rabbit hole of this is the only thing that we can do, right?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I think the one thing, and I don't know. You kind of mentioned it earlier, and I don't think it was about this, but it applies to it, and I think it's important for people to think about. But, how many, as a non-bodybuilder, at most, how many times does someone compete in a year, amateur?
Man, that's a whole other ballgame there. But
roughly on average?
I'd say two to three times a year, maybe.
Okay. So
three being the max.
Yeah. So that's 3 times a year. Out of 365 days, there's only 3 times a year where someone gets on stage that either trains or has a coach or that someone coaches that actually shows the result of the thing that this coach does. Well, it's a marketing thing, right? If there's only 3 times a year I can advertise my client's progress, the easiest way in the digital age to advertise what you do is rather than focus on your client putting on sustainable tissue and being able to present it, you get your client to load machines heavier and for more reps every week so you can post a video, right? Like,
yep.
I think that can't be overlooked right now in fitness as a whole, but especially in your community bodybuilding. There's a really big motivator to constantly drive output of a machine because most 3 times a year someone's getting on stage and actually dieting down and posing. Of the 3 times they actually might get on stage a year, half the time none of these people get on stage. Because I watch when someone announces that they're going to compete, I sit there and watch because I'm stoked for it, man. Like, because I do powerlifting.
Yeah.
When someone says they're going to do a meet in powerlifting, barring tearing something, they just show up and just lift something.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, oh, fuck yeah, this guy I know is going to compete. So when someone says they're going to compete in bodybuilding, I'm like, sick, what does this guy look like? And then I wait, and then it's radio silence. And it's like, well, for the rest of the year, I was super pumped to watch this person put 8 plates on the shoulder press. But I don't even know at this point what the result of any of this programming is, because I've rarely seen the people that do it make it to the point where they can present it. And I'm not calling anybody out.
Right.
I'm saying I want to know because I've yet to see a majority of people with this training style make it to a point where they can show me what it does.
Right. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole in and of itself, right? But the other thing that the output side, like focusing too much on output has become, is that bodybuilding has now become a strength sport on the internet, right? Like, because when you get on stage, no one gives a fuck. No one asks you how much did you shoulder press or how much you row or how, like, no one cares. They care about what your back double looks like, what your conditioning, like that's the things that they care about is how you present it. So when you get on stage, you being stronger than the guy left and right of you means fuck all, right? So do we need to get stronger to build tissue? Yes, I would argue. I would argue, to a certain extent. I don't need to be the strongest person on the planet having every machine maxed out possible. That doesn't equate to me being a better bodybuilder, right? So I think that, again, making sure that I give credit here, Shallow said this not that long ago, it shouldn't be progressive overload. It's progressive stimulus, right? The stimulus is what needs to evolve and change, not the load. Like, we don't need to be the strongest overhead presser, the strongest squatter, the strongest leg press. Like, that does not matter. It does not translate to more tissue, always. I know so many people who can squat more than me, who can leg press more than me, who can do X, Y, and Z more than me, but I guarantee my quads are probably bigger than theirs. And that's a genetic thing. I have genetically big legs. So it doesn't necessarily mean that just because I put more weight on the bar that I'm going to have bigger legs or bigger back or X, Y, and Z. Execution is what we need to focus on, and the execution is determined by the application of the exercise that we chose, right? And we can choose different applications there, right? So, like, we'll go back to your example that you used for yourself with the single arm cable pull down. You pronate at the top. I don't, right? Like, not for my output exercise or output movement. I'm not going to pronate out, right? Not the way I have it programmed now, but you are. So your exercise execution changes. It looks different than mine. But that doesn't mean that your execution and your movement pattern is worse than mine, right?
Yeah.
It is better than mine depending on what the application of the exercise is.
Yeah.
Does it meet the criteria of what you want it to do? Yes. Beautiful. That's what you need. So the things that are kind of boiling out here that I'm coming away with anyways, and maybe you have different viewpoints on it as well, is like the big thing here is the focus on output and a sales tactic, right? It's what's flashy, because if I go and tell somebody, hey, you're doing that wrong and here's why, or hey, use this exercise because it's better than this exercise and here's why, I now look like I know what I'm talking about, right? Especially to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. And that's where a lot of people are pushing their information to, is people that don't know any better, yeah. Right? And to be completely transparent, I've said that, I said it at the beginning, like I got myself in a dogmatic place where like I this was the only way to do this and this was the only way to do that. And then listening to someone who had those viewpoints of like, well, this is perfect because X and this is perfect because Y, I decided that that person knew more than me, right? And I needed to go and seek out their information. But what I come to find out is that talk and stuff is more of a smoke bomb than anything. It's a smoke bomb that they throw, and then that smoke, like when you don't know what you're talking about or you don't have that information, it like confuses you and you're like, holy shit, I need help. I've got to help me. And then their hand is there waiting for you, right? Because they threw a smoke bomb down, they can help you out of it. They know how to get you out. But then once the smoke clears, you're like, wait, this is just a chest press.
Yeah.
This is just a pull down. Like, it's the same stuff, just in a different package. Right? It's no different than anyone else's training. Like, there's no reinventing the wheel here. Like, training is training. And, like, there might be a new piece of equipment, or there might be some exercise that someone puts their name on that hits whatever really well, but that doesn't mean that that's the only exercise you can do to now train X, Y, and Z. Right? It doesn't have to, we don't have to take these things. It's like, that's the best exercise ever, and then forget everything else.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? Like you said, everything is still what it's always been. Like, I think the biggest takeaway, I don't know if it's a takeaway from this, but I think if we were to boil down all these metaphors to something, I think everyone in bodybuilding should think of training this way. How long ago was the wheel invented? When, like, there were still Neanderthals that existed? The wheel hasn't changed. Like, a wheel, right. I'm sorry to say, a wheel is this. It's round, and it's sick because it rolls. It's just a thing that rolls. Has the wheel changed? No, but what has changed is what the wheel is made out of, how big the wheel is, how small the wheel is, the material of the wheel, what's inside the wheel. All those things changed, but they all change dependent on what the wheel has to do.
It is still fundamentally a wheel.
It's a wheel. It is a wheel covered in different things. Like, no, I'm not going to go to Home Depot and buy casters for a computer desk and put them on my F-150. That's not the right wheel for that truck. But I'm not going to put 24-inch rims and Michelin tires on my computer desk because I'm not weird. So it's like, this is training. It's a wheel. Cover the wheel in different things, but you'll only know what you're covered in if you go train. And then it'll be blatantly obvious what you need to put on your wheels, you know?
Right.
Drive to the place. Go do it.
Yeah, right. And the underlying thing there that you said without saying it is what I said earlier, application. So the application of what you need the wheel for is what's going to determine whether it's good or not, right? So, like, the F-150 wheels on your desk is retarded. And maybe we'd need to talk about the compensation that you're doing there with those wheels, if that's the case, right? But application is 100% what matters here. Like, that is the determining factor of all of these things. And then I'm going to keep circling back to this. If the person enjoys it, right? The person has to enjoy doing that. And I guarantee there have been cases of me training people where I gave them a program and they just didn't tell me that they didn't like it, right? But because I was determining that it was the best thing for them, without them giving me the feedback, they eventually were like, oh, I think I'm going to go somewhere else, right? So instead of, like, forcing someone into this thing, find out, hey, Are you enjoying this? Is it working well? Are you moving? Are you progressing? Are things looking the way we need it to? Like, that's what matters at the end of the day. And, yeah, I mean, I was sitting here trying to think while you're explaining that, like, has there been anything new that's come out in training that has revolutionized an exercise? Not really, right? Like, my arms, my legs, they have worked the same way for thousands of years. Like, I can't say 100%, but I'm pretty sure your legs and my legs do the same things. Like, the knee flexes, the hip flexes, they extend, like, they move in the same general areas, right? And you can't change until evolution decides that we need another leg or another arm or whatever, or that some joint we have is not necessary. Training's not going to change. There's exercises that work well. There's exercises that don't, right? So, like, and that is all determined on the person, what they have available, and what we're looking to do, right? So trying to, I lost my train of thought there, but, like, the big thing that I want to get across here at the end of this is, don't be so quick to just throw things out because they're not perfect, right? Figure out what's perfect for that person in that context, right? Whether you're talking about yourself or whoever it is, like if you have clients, it's terrible to take the person and force them onto the exercise than it is to take some exercises and give it to the person, right? We're not fitting people to exercises, we're fitting exercises to people, right? And I think that makes sense. Maybe I'm wrong there, but, like, we've got to make sure that the exercises we're choosing fit the person well, not the other way around of forcing someone into an exercise just because.
Yeah. No, man, I think it's totally correct, right? Like you said, nothing's changed about exercise. It has to be something someone's willing to do. And, like, the last thing that I would say about all of it is just have some respect for the thing you want to compete at or the thing that's your job. And, like,
sure,
look into the history of it, because none of this is new. Like, length tension relationship, there's a book from, like, 1989 or 91 on length tension relationship that describes how to train short, mid-range, and lengthen for all of the major muscle groups. It's just a workout plan based on length tension relationship. You can Google it. I think it's, like, at my parents' house somewhere. Output over everything. Do you know who decided on output over everything? Arthur Jones, the guy who invented Nautilus, is the output over everything guy. Arthur Jones was a patent-protected inventor who enjoyed working out and built Nautilus machines because he was a traveling salesman, and it was really easy to give people a good workout because they didn't need to know how to train. Arthur Jones enlisted the Menser brothers and Casey Viator in that completely biased, bizarre Colorado experiment where Casey Viator got humongous. Here's the thing, like, output over everything, using a machine for external stability, driving all of these, like, metabolically challenging behaviors. That was a guy who was a traveling salesman who invented it. He wasn't even a bodybuilder. So to shy away from the history of these ideas, or to shy away from the idea that a guy doesn't have to be a bodybuilder to figure it out, then I guess Arthur Jones, the patent-protected traveling salesman, has pulled the wool on everyone's eyes for like 60 years now. That's kind of disappointing, you know? He never was a bodybuilder. He's just a jacked old dude. You ever seen the picture of him, by the way, with his shirt off?
No, I haven't.
Dude, he looks like Junior from The Sopranos, but, like, jacked out of his gourd. But anyways, like,
that's awesome.
Like, I know about this stuff only because, like, I gave a shit to be like, why do people train this way? And I was like, oh, this is like a 6-year-old idea by a traveling salesman. No wonder it has some holes in it. It holds some weight, and then has massive holes. Obviously.
Right.
It was a sales tactic back then. It's a sales tactic now.
Right, yeah, and we said that already. It's a sales tactic, right?
Yeah.
And, like, I haven't been around long enough to be able to speak to it myself, but the people who have been before me, who have been in the industry for decades, they talk about how cyclical things are, right? And then that goes across the fitness space, right? Where it's like, all of a sudden these supplements start coming back up, where it's like, oh, this is the best supplement ever, and it's like anabolic steroids. And, like, it's going to get you X, Y, and Z. And it's like, hey, you know that came out 30 years ago, right? And people did this same thing tried to sell it, and then everybody realized it sucked, and then it went away again. And then it booted back up, right? Because there was one study that showed X, Y, and Z. Yeah. It's like, the one thing I want to make sure that we touch on before we head out is, like, neither one of us is saying that output is not the key to building muscle, right? Output is 100% the thing that we need to do. We have to output. Like, we have to get into proximity to failure. But there's other things other than just output that helps create a solid program, that helps create a longevity within the sport or whatever it is you're looking to do, right? Whether you're just like the soccer mom looking to get in better shape, or you're training to be Mr. Olympia, right? The runway needs to be long. I don't know about everybody listening to this. I don't know about you, Killian. I want to be able to walk in that gym when I'm fucking 70, 80, whatever. Until I physically cannot get to the gym, I want to be there. And I understand that I'm not going to be the 250, 260-pound bodybuilder my whole life. There's going to come a point where that has to end, right? So to have such a short, limited, like, the horse blinder look at it of, like, this is the only way I can do things is just, to me, has become a foreign language. Where it's like, what are you even saying, right? Where it's, I understand it, I get it, and yes, you are correct, output is the way to go, and output is king when it comes to building tissue, but there's other aspects to training that can support the output, right? Because if stability goes, guess what else goes with it? Output.
Yeah.
Like, output's going to go. And I can speak to that all day because it's like I didn't have stability at my hips, I didn't have stability at my shoulders, and then all of a sudden I can't press overhead, I can't squat. Like, all these things start to go when you don't have a not better understanding, but a well-built program that helps support all of these other things versus just muscle over everything, right? Yeah. Or however much tissue you're going to build by only focusing on output over having a spread out, even look at training. I think we got kind of the full squeeze on that lemon, huh?
Yeah, man. I think that was good. Hopefully it's beneficial to people. I'm sure, like, you have a ton of, obviously, friends and people that look up to you in the bodybuilding community, so I'm sure people will listen to this and have no respect for me, so that'll be interesting when this comes out.
No, man, fuck that. The thing, like, since he just said that, the reason I wanted to have Killian on, and Killian's, like, the first person it's literally the first episode, since I did it before, but the reason I wanted to have him on is because I want to get outside of bodybuilding. Yeah. I want to have, like, I love bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is my thing, and I'm going to do it as long as I possibly can. But to have that narrow scope where I'm only listening to the same people makes me the same as everybody else. Like, and that is never what I've wanted to be. I don't want to be the same as everyone else. So why would I not want to listen to someone like Killian who has an understanding of training? Like, I'm not going to call Killian and go, hey, dude, I've got this nutrition question, and I really don't know where to go with it. No, that's not the person I'm going to go to about that. Like, Killian has a great idea or a great understanding of training and the human body. The human body does not change. It comes back to his analogy of the wheel. The wheel is the wheel. The human body is the human body. It might have some different trimmings. It might have a different tread on it, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's just a different implementation or a different focus as to what's happening. So I'm going to completely dismiss what Killian said there, and you guys need to go check him out. Killian Hamilton on Instagram, and he's all over the Prescript Instagram and those kind of things too. So I would strongly recommend looking up his social media, checking out the full Prescript stuff. Jordan Shallow, all those guys, listen to them on the RX radio. That was my first official introduction to those guys when everything was going like this, like way over my head. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. I'm sure we'll be able to do another one at some point and have another random rant.
Yeah, sure, I'd love to.
All right, man. Thanks for everybody tuning in.
Yeah, no worries. See ya.